Hi everyone, this is a very quick overview of organizations. The reason we're talking about organizations at all is because this is a course on workplace leadership, and workplace is something that we need to spend a few minutes on before we spend the rest of the semester on leadership. So what is an organization? Well, the definition for what an organization is really depends on the reason that you're trying to define an organization. So if you take it from an economic point of view, there's a definition. If you take it from a communications point of view, from an industrial organizational psych point of view, from an organizational behavior point of view, each of those will give you slightly different definitions. So what I'm going to give you is a nice generic general definition for an organization. So according to Greenwald, organizations are bodies of individuals working under a defined system of rules, assignments, and procedures, and there are relationships designed to achieve identifiable objectives and goals. So this is a general definition for a formal organization. Now there are of course informal organizations that you are a part of. Your family is an informal organization. A group is an informal organization. Some clubs might be informal organizations, but this definition, and obviously what we're primarily focusing on in this class, are formal organizations. So formal organizations include things like corporations and agencies and hospitals and churches and political parties and some clubs, depending on how formal those clubs are organized. So formal organizations generally have several things going on in them. One is that they have a social arrangement. So formal organizations have some sort of agreed upon way that people interact with each other. So if you think about the job that you currently work at or a job that you worked at in the past, there were in fact norms around how people interacted with each other in that organization. Organizations also generally have structure and management. So there's some sort of hierarchy. Very often that hierarchy is displayed as an organizational chart, but even if there isn't an org chart, still there is some sort of hierarchy. You know who is the most in charge, who is the least in charge, you know who you report to, you know the relationships between the reporting of other people in the organization. So that structure, there's also some sort of agreement in terms of management. So how people that are responsible for other groups of people will perform or behave in the organization, how they will manage. Formal organizations also have a collective goal, so they have some reason for being or some organizational objective. So this isn't necessarily the 2016 goal or the 2017 goal. This is why are we even here as an organization. If our organization is the Cub Scouts, the reason that we're here is to help develop boys and give them skills both in terms of socializing and in terms of specific content areas. If we're a bank, we're there so that we can loan money to the community so that they can be effective in their lives. So you have some general collective goal, some reason for being. And then you also have controls and performance. And so controls and performance, this is really how we get work done in the organization. What are the steps? What are the processes? What are the procedures that we use to get work done? And then an organization is also an open structure. So this is as opposed to a closed structure. So an open structure is one that is affected by inputs and can also affect others by its outputs. So that's why it's considered an open system, because there are inputs and there are outputs rather than being a closed system. So let me talk a little bit more about this open structure. So you can think of an organization like this. So you see right smack in the middle is the organization, and there are inputs, there are things that influence the organization, that come into the organization either literally or just in terms of, you know, the climate that's happening outside of the organization. And then of course at the bottom you'll see there are also outputs. So as organizations, we output somehow. We might create product, we might create services, but whatever it is, there's some sort of contribution out of the organization. So Hickman came up with this picture. So this picture shows you up at the top, the input is really about the external context. So the input might be the competitive environment, the input might be regulatory requirements, it might be things that are happening in the community, things that are happening in your profession, things that are happening to your customer group. But there are things that are happening externally that will influence what goes on inside the organization. Now if you jump to the bottom, for output, you'll see Hickman says generate organizational contributions to society. I also added customers and others, just to make society a little bit more specific there. But whatever it is we do as an organization, it generates something outside of the organization. So if we're the Cub Scouts, what we generate is whatever impact we have on those young men. If we are a bank, our output is the loans that we give, the other financial services that we provide. So whatever it is we do, it somehow gets out of our organization into the general environment. And then you'll see, because of this dotted line, you'll see it's just a giant loop. So we start with the external context, which influences our organization. Whatever we do as an organization is an output into the external context, which then influences our organization, which then generates output, which then becomes part of the external context, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big loop that we see in this chart. So then in the middle is the organization, and I picked this image by Hickman because he really is just talking about the leader part of the organization. Obviously there's other things that go on in the organization. But you'll see over here we have an oval that has leaders in it, and over here we have an oval that has the participants of the organization, whether those are associates or team members or employees, whatever you want to call them. And then in the middle we have this overlapping area between leaders and organizational participants that represents a shared responsibility for leadership and for whatever our common purpose is. So as leaders and as organizational participants, we're responsible for and contribute to the mission and the vision of the organization. We're responsible for and contribute to the culture of the organization, for upholding and supporting the ethics of the organization, for whatever change happens in the organization, and to build capacity so that the organization can continue to be successful and grow. So I wanted to share this picture because sometimes it's easy to think of leaders and leadership as just a very small, narrow thing that has nothing to do with anything else. But obviously, as you see in this picture, leaders influence participants. Leaders also influence the mission and vision, the culture, the ethics, the change, and the capacity building. All of that influences the output of the organization, which then becomes part of the external context, which comes back into the organization, and that's part of the environment within which we need to lead. So that's all I'm going to say about organization. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context, give you a picture of what organizations are, how it works from a leadership and an input-output standpoint.